This meeting is being recorded.
All right, okay. So, Becca, Johnny, hi everyone. Today we are going to be coming at you with our March read. Okay, it's one of
March.
those. Yes, there you go. March reads. It's one of those types of days, and that was the Westing game, which Becca picked out. So she has the physical copy. I don't. So there's no book behind me because I read it on a PDF. So yeah, hey.
That's not working.
Good attempt, but yeah. So yeah, basically the Weston game was our March read. If you don't know who we are, hi, I'm Nats. This is my channel Inks and Tomes. With me is Becca. She might be here or here. And she runs a channel called Words and Others. Words and Other Malarkey?
Yes.
There we go.
Good
There
job.
we go. I got it right. And you can find her details in the description, or I'll put a card somewhere up here. And also my wonderful co-host, who I've done some one-on-one book discussions, Jonathan. Rip my
I'm
own
glad
head.
you remember because sometimes I forget.
All right. So basically we're going to go with our usual format, which is favorite, least favorite character, favorite, least favorite scene, and then rants and bants if we have any. Although for this book, it was quite nice. I know that it's a children's book. I looked it up, at least that's what Goodreads told me. And I didn't really have many rants as for some YA. So, children's fiction better than YA fiction? Debatable? No, I'm joking. But yeah. Let's start with favorite, least favorite character. If you guys have them, what will it be?
I mean, there were 16 to choose from, so somewhere in there's got to be like a hierarchy. I'll go first since I spoke. My least favorite character, I think, was Mr. Who, the restaurant owner, only because he felt like such a caricature. Most of these characters were honestly more three-dimensional than I expected, but he was the only one that really felt like a stereotype. So some of the lines he said, though I did like the gag about him being mad about his son being a track star and not like an academic student. He's like, go study, stop running. Anyways, that was a funny joke. But my most favorite character is actually Chris the Adarakis, the disabled character who like bird watches, and like his mind, like he was so pure, and I love the relationship between him and his brother Theo. Like it was such a sweet relationship that they had, so I really enjoyed being inside his head. And anytime that he was involved, like anytime anything happened, even if it was like kind of suspicious, Chris was like just so excited to be doing something. He was like, all right, I'm getting kidnapped. Like it was awesome. It was so cute.
I'm gonna interject and say that I'm a bit silly. I didn't even say what the book was about. We kind of forgot the summary of all in one spell.
Everybody's just like, what the heck are you talking about? Like,
Becca,
all right.
What the heck is the Westing game?
Yeah, so Becca, because you recommended it, summarize the Westing game for us.
All right, so the Westing game is like sort of a mystery like puzzle where this paper tycoon dies or is murdered, but leaves this will that pits these 16 individuals, potential heirs, that all happen to live in the same apartment building. It's very like not coincidental. They pit them against each other to solve this puzzle and win the Westing inheritance, and that is the Westing game. So they get paired up and they each have a set of clues, and they're trying to figure out what the answer to the puzzle is. And there's a lot of like misdirection and misunderstanding and hijinks. And it's a very interesting kind of some sort of dark comedy, almost like mystery book, kind of mature for a children's book.
Yeah, I actually was surprised when I saw on Goodreads that I was classified under children's, because I thought that it was pretty... Again, I feel like it's a good representation of a book where there's a discussion of what makes a children's book or a young adult book young adult. Like, is it because the main character or one of the characters is a child? Is it because of the length of the book? Is it because of the language used? You know, a lot of people argue it's like, oh, it's because the themes are what children go through. Clearly, this is not something a child would go through. So that argumentation doesn't hold up. And then you have kind of a dissonance between argumentation for children's literature and young adult and adult literature. So I feel like there's a lot to discuss here. But yes, thank you so much. That is exactly what the book is about. The best way that I felt this book was, it was like, it gave me the same feeling as doing an escape room, but in the sense of you're like trying to piece it together, and you're like, oh, here's some red herring, and it's like, oh, here's another piece, etc. And I would say that it did what it did really well was allowed you to figure out the mystery alongside the characters. Because a lot of books, I feel sometimes they make the mystery by withholding information from the readers as well. So you don't know the information that the characters know, which actually really well, or a really great example was what we saw in Crooked Kingdom, with like when Wylan comes up into the church and he sees two characters there, and he's like, oh yeah, and he spilt everything, and you're just like, oh my god, what's happened? And then the next scene you see, it's like, oh wait, well, this was all premeditated, and obviously there's nothing like mysterious there. It was you not in the know rather than the character, whereas here it felt like you were there with the information that the characters had, so you had an equal shot at trying to figure out who it was, really.
I agree. It's a very strange book. It's like it's the same way a children's book as like to like Lord of the Flies or other like older pieces of literature are maybe read by children, but it's got a lot of adult themes in it that maybe you wouldn't pick up on if you were like, 12, 13 reading this. Like the consequences of some of the things that the characters are dealing with, they don't have as much impact with you. You're just there for the mystery. But like as you're reading, you read into the struggles of the characters, their like marital lives, their financial situations and stuff, as you're more aware of it as an adult. But the theme of it's, I'd say it's like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory meets Agatha Christie meets Cluedo.
Yeah.
Like it's so crazy, like psychological, odd way of trying to basically figure out who's supposed to inherit Sam Westing's fortune. And I guess going into spoiler territory, guess what? He's 4 different people and he's still alive. Which is just like, what? And yeah, it's definitely got Willy Wonka vibes of just like, wait, so you just wanted to figure out who you wanted to be your successor? Yeah. But then why did you lead all these kids on a wild goose chase around a factory, and one of them drowned in chocolate and one of them got stretched? It's got similar vibes as that. This book, I had to check when they were written, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory came out in like 1971, and this is like 1978, so quite close. Maybe there was some inspiration from it. I don't know, but like in this, it was more, here's a whole smattering of characters. They're not all kids. There's a handful. And through their various tiny described motivations, like or backgrounds, they only give you nuggets. They don't go into great detail, which I kind of like. You discover who they are through what they do, instead of like them having you narrate like all of their personality to you, like the narrator or the I guess the descriptives in the story. It's just like, oh, you can tell what you think about this character or what they're supposed to be like through their actions in the book or through their dialogue. Is it snappy? Is it kind? Is it probing? Like, it's a fascinating book, I think, but it's still kind of like short and sweet and very bizarre. I did enjoy it though.
Yeah, fair enough. I agree. But I'm good. This is gonna be fun to edit because I'm gonna timestamp Becca's favorite and least favorite character. Then do this is actually the introduction to the book, and then our favorite and least favorite character. So Johnny, who was your fave and not fave?
least favorite would be either Mr. Who or it was Angela, I think is her name.
The girl who was the bomber at the end, and she was
Oh
like
yeah,
super pretty, and
Angela Wax, the sister of Turtle.
yeah.
Just didn't seem to like. I didn't understand her motivations half the time. Like maybe it's because she was like prized over by her mother, or like but I didn't understand sometimes like where the favoring of like so the other characters, they never find out the whole story. It's only Turtle really that knows. Maybe Theo later on in his life. Like,
Yeah.
obviously he'd probably be like, so how did you end up with all this money? It's like, well,
Played the stock market really well.
I just played the stuff. It's like, why did he give you his house? I found the deed, like, or something like. No, but like, but surely if you'd want to rope the both the sisters into the decision making, like, but I just didn't. She didn't have a lot of depth, and there wasn't enough room to explore 16 characters. I don't think in some cases, and like her and a couple other characters sort of felt like there wasn't a lot going for them, or
Yeah.
they never really rounded out their story very well. At least covers a little bit in the epilogue, I guess.
Yeah. What about
And
Fave?
favorite, probably Mr. Westing himself, playing 4 different people, a corpse, the doorman. I guess Sandy, then the doorman Sandy, who is actually Mr. Westing. But
Spoilers.
yeah, sorry, spoilerinos.
No, I
But
mean, spoilers, this is what we're all about. So if you guys who are watching haven't guessed, we are going to be spoiling this book a lot. So bear in mind, even though you just found out the ending like 5 minutes ago when Johnny told you about Mr. Westing, but
I feel like it was a lot funnier, like, or his interaction throughout the book and his kindness to like Turtle and like different bits and bobs like become so much funner once you figure out that he was Mr. Westing, and then you look back at what you read in the book the first time, you're like, so he's just like he's in on the whole thing because he made it, set it up. Like it's the mind of a madman, but like, but it's just funnier to like think of him just like watching these people trying to figure out. It's like watching people figure out an escape room and you're on the camera, but instead you're standing in the room pretending to not know the puzzle. But I just enjoyed the fact that like I didn't catch on at all until it was revealed. But as I said, there's not that much dialogue to digest or character exploration to be like, this is exactly why I like them because this arc and this chapter, like it doesn't really have that so much as other books do. It's more, here's 16 characters, you find stuff out about them as you go.
yeah.
I just enjoyed that I bought his story and then had it be he's 4 different people.
Yeah, fair enough. I think for me, the characters were kind of split just into 2 groups, like characters I didn't really care about, or as in like, again, yeah, they felt like dummies to progress the story. Although again, I don't think any character felt shoehorned in. Like you never felt that they were there, even though I'm contradicting myself. They never felt like they were there to progress the story, even though you knew they kind of were, if that makes sense. Like unlike Six of Crows or Crooked Kingdom, by the way, spoilers as well. You can compare this to like The Assassin in White, where that was so obvious that was there in order to create tension, whereas here you're kind of like, oh, this is just a cast of characters that you need, but it never felt like jarring. You never stopped and said, this is definitely here in order for this to happen or to progress, etc. At least that's what I felt like. So for me, it was kind of like, the important characters and the kind of less important characters. And I guess the less important characters in that category would have to be like Angela, the Who's both Madam Who and James Who. Didn't really like them. I didn't like the mother. I thought her like Turtle's mom. She just irritated me. Like
Oh, she's
her,
the worst.
yes, like that was more like a dislike of her character. Um, but for likable characters who I was invested to see when I was on the page, Chris, 100%, Turtle, Westing, Sandy, and him being Westing, that was really good. I really liked that. So yeah, I would have to say, and Flora. I think I actually really liked her story about how she, slowly grew close and became the mother figure for Turtle. And when, when Turtle stopped being angry at, her mentioning her daughter, and Turtle started calling her Baba. I was like, oh, this is really, really cute and wholesome. And I really enjoy that character interaction. So that's kind of my two camps there for characters. But yeah, now that we've discussed characters, favorite and least favorite scene, but we can combine it with rants and bants if you guys want, because I feel like this book is one of those exceptions where it's like every scene is connected to everything. So it can be like a favorite scene because of, and least favorite scene because of. So do what you will with that information.
It's so vignette-y. Like the scenes were so short, and like I'm trying to think, like I can't even
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
Isolate them. I can think of like specific like moments. Like I really liked the wordplay. Like the one that sticks out is like the scenes where they wrote, where they had to fill out like a piece of paper for the game, and they had to write their occupation and the sorts of things that people wrote. And Angela, who, it's interesting, you guys like didn't like, she wasn't really that fleshed out, but I thought it was interesting, like even though it was like her being the bomber was odd, I thought it was interesting, her arc, like even though, and her relationship with Seidel, like it was such an odd friendship. But like I'm getting off track, but like this book did a really pretty good job of like with Flora and Turtle, and with her and Seidel and a couple of others, of like creating these really nuanced like relationships. Like there were certain pairs that like really like grew to be friends, or just like have a real like respect for each other. Anyways, where was I going with this? All right, Angela writes no occupation, and her fiance, who I just love how much of an airhead he's supposed to be. Like he's kind of just like a plot device, but he's really, but even he does things occasionally, but not very many things. He's mostly there to kind of just be the looming figure of Angela's future as a housewife. And he's like confused as to why she wrote none, because he thought he meant
none.
N-U-N, none. And that, for some reason, that just got me. So
for a doctor, you'd think that he would,
like, he's supposed to be so dumb. I love how they're always like pointing out that he's an intern, but like he like spends like, I'm a doctor, and then anytime he gives a diagnosis, like he's a plastic surgeon intern or something, something like cosmetic, but he keeps giving like diagnoses for like everything. And like they're all wrong. Just that whole gag, they had some really funny gags just going throughout that I really enjoyed. So like least favorite scene, I know that there were some scenes that fell flat for me, but honestly they were so wrapped up in the whole plot that I can't really like think of them off the bat. So that's all I got.
Fair. Johnny?
Honestly, as you guys said, every scene flows into each other. It feels very much hard to separate them, if not just by the chapters. But I didn't like. I think best or favorite is just the wrap up, because it brought everything together. Like I enjoyed like Turtle going up, having figured out the game, like I figured out the answer, going into the room and being like, hello, such and such, like, and that and she knew that she'd won, and then the epilogue later of just sort of talking to them on their deathbed. And I thought the dialogue was quite realistic into how someone that's not all there at the minute would ask questions and want to know. But it's fascinating that they seem to care like on their deathbed so much about this one game with this one confusing way of determining an heir, and not like, oh, I wonder how like a Jim who I used to know as my neighbor is doing, or like, or other people that have been a big impact in their life. I'm sure there's many if you live to 85, but um, and then like least favorite is, so Turtle is supposed to be, I think 13, if I
Yeah.
remember rightly. And there's this point where they're reading off the will. I think it's like in chapter 24, where she figures out through the descriptions that it's like it was referring to finding the fourth. There's a fourth person. Oh, who's that? Oh, it's the I don't even remember how to say the name properly, but Wendy Woodcouple or
Winclopple or something.
Yeah,
Woodclopple. Anyway,
Windclop or something like
and she was like, "Ah, so that's who that." So, and it all pieces it together, and then she stops herself from saying something and adjusts what she was about to say or the question she was going to ask. Like, but it just felt like you wouldn't at 13 have the like the emotional maturity and wisdom to make that odd adjustment and be like and change what you were about to say to the, I think it was the judge that was reading the will, um, Judge Ford, I think. It's
that.
been a little
Yeah.
bit. And it was just like, this is a lot for a 13-year-old to ask or to think about and know exactly what to do. And how would you react to at 13 realizing that you were about to inherit an estate? You just figured it out and you could go and give the answer. Like, these are big things to give to a 13-year-old. But no, it's not. There's not much I can find that's a poor scene or a good scene. The book is just a scene. It reads like a play. It reads like a drama.
Yeah.
It does it. It's not like, it doesn't really have acts. I guess it has a first act of getting them all into the Sunset Towers, and all the characters moving in and describing the place. And but most of it is all one huge act. If it was a stage show, I imagine like the play, the scene would barely stop. Like maybe you'd have one of those cool rotating stages where like the next room rolls in and the actors just move through a door. Like there wasn't any curtain closing moments. It just kind of kept rolling as a story. It would be like, okay, here's what these two are up to. Stage rolls. Here's what these two are up to. Oh, they just figured out this bit, and then they're all together discussing how such and such ended up in such a way. Yeah, it's all one big thing, but it's still
Yeah.
it was fun to read.
I would have to say I agree with you, Johnny, that my favorite scene was probably the epilogue when everything, or like the last one where it all came together. Although I do agree as well that it's a bit odd for this man, on his deathbed to be very, very curious about this one specific game that happened. But I think I will transition this into rants and bans section immediately, because I think I'm going to juxtapose your position again with some of the other stuff that we read and say that Turtle, actually, while she is a character like a 13-year-old and has these capabilities to play the stock market and figure this entire thing out, right, as a 13-year-old, and have the capacity to argue like a lawyer, really. I think it's done in a very believable way, in the sense of you stopped at Turtle's character very little compared to some of the other characters. Like the fact that what she was doing didn't jump out at you as insanely unrealistic, right? There wasn't a lot of her decisions which you were like, okay, this is a bit unrealistic. It was like a couple, and then you can obviously put it down to it being fiction and, the exaggeration of character. And I mean, that's what all fictional characters, right? Like a lot of them have an exaggerated quality of something. So I felt that for Turtle, it was just her exaggerated wisdom, which was her or like cleverness, which was the characteristic, rather than her being an unbelievable character. Like unlike, let's say, some of the birds that we read about, that was a bit
birds.
testy there. Like, it didn't feel like she was somebody who had, baggage of like 20 years that she was somehow still 13. Like that was not the case here. So
She was a clever 13-year-old.
Yeah, it's just, to me, like she was just a clever 13-year-old, and it was especially if you think about it back in the day as well, like, yeah, she was trading money, and there was a reason why she was doing what she was doing, and that was because her dad, right, that was she did have some connection with finance beforehand. Like it wasn't just a spur of the moment. She did have a reason for her doing this.
Her dad was a bookie.
Oh yeah, exactly. No, but that was the
But
entire point, right?
Yeah.
Like her dad was a bookie, so she was like around this for like gambling and stuff like that for this long period of time. So
it's a more compelling backstory than Kaz Brecker's. His dad was never a bookie. How'd he learn?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, so it was, to me, it was believable. So I think that was one of the biggest things about this book, is that the characters, there was at no point you were like, this is awful, like this character is just unbelievable. They had, again, exaggerated qualities. I think if you really had to like look and be, I don't know, like put it under the microscope, then the Who family obviously was a bit like, in modern day it wouldn't really fly. Like some of the comparisons were just a bit like, okay, we get it that this book was written in the 70s, but beyond that, it was, these are characters that are likable, and they don't impede the telling of the story. Like you don't stop and be like, I don't like why are you doing this? You're just kind of like immersed, and it was an experience from beginning to end. I think I gave this book 4 stars, and I took a star off personally from my own enjoyment, in the sense of like I was never fully invested. Like I always add like half a star or even a star depending on how I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed it, which is why I gave it like an extra half star, and it's a solid 4, or like 4.25. But it didn't, it wasn't like oh my god, this is so exciting. Like I had to get myself to sit down and read it a little bit, and I think the problem there was maybe the snippets for me, while they were super interesting, sometimes they were too abrupt, I would think. That it sometimes felt that you were, as you were like getting into understanding who these characters were, or like what they were doing, all of a sudden it's like, boop, but you're in a different scene, and then all of a sudden, whoop, you're in somewhere, like you were just jumping around a lot. And for me, again, I think that as a concept, that was great because it really pulled it together. But sometimes I wish there was just a smidge more, just like for it to be like the length of the scenes to be more like the epilogue, where you're like, you sit down, you talk, instead of it being like a page sometimes even. So that was kind of my gripe with it, a little bit, and that took away from my enjoyment because I felt like I couldn't really immerse myself with it. But that's my opinion. What about you guys?
The number of times I had to read something twice, like a little section like of 3 paragraphs before it jumps to something else, I'd get to the jump and be like, well, what was the nugget I was supposed to glean there? Like I wasn't sure. I'd go back and read it and think, I'd be like, I think it's this, like, and usually that was correct, but there were times where it doesn't stand out to you. Like you're like, that's, I need to digest this. It doesn't give you enough time, or it doesn't give you, you'd have to do things in sittings. Like I had to binge this book, because if I picked it, like I found the times that I went and picked it up again, or to read sections of it again, I'd often go back a chapter just so I was back on the train of thought or something. It's like a train of thought, the book. It's like you have to be if you take yourself away from the puzzle and try and come back to it 2 days later, it's hard. But it was still like it was a fun read, but challenging at times of just like I don't know where this is going or why is it so convoluted, and it wraps itself up okay at the end and the characters. But yeah, it's an enjoyment factor. Like, add or take away a star. I agree with that sort of summary. Like, I could easily see how someone would give it like a lower rating if they didn't enjoy the story at all. I found it still pretty fun because I always liked mystery books, I guess, or puzzle solving books like Sherlock. Just the books that is like by Arthur Conan Doyle, but not so much the telly as I ranted about in the other video. But I did sort of one thing I gleaned from the book that I don't think I feel like it was a point it was trying to make whilst not never directly stating it, was that the reason that Turtle did so well or was quite good at following things was because and same with characters like Theo and Chris, um, they were able to figure out some of the clues or at least follow things better because they were treating it like a game. They had a childlike wonder and like kids, you love solving riddles. There's never any like backing to it. Whereas a lot of the adults were treating the situation like they were thinking about the money. They were thinking about like why is this happening and everything, instead of just going, okay, here's a problem, solve the problem, or here's a clue, solve the clue. And I can see how some of the decision making could be made by a 13-year-old, if you know what I mean. Like, it does make somewhat sense because there's a childlike wonder and delight for solving puzzles. She's probably not bogged down with the thoughts of how am I going to manage this estate if I win it, and what do I do? What do I do with all the money and stuff like that? She's probably not thinking about any of that and just going, clues, solve them, fun.
I mean, she did want the money to have a subscription to the New Yorker. I found that very, very cute. I also...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna just intervene and say I remembered one more scene that I actually really liked from the book. It just popped up. I liked the character development actually of the airhead fiance, because he kept asking Chris to sign the check. And then at one point we get him to be like, there's a new medicine that I heard, like my friend from this department talked about, it might help you. And then Chris is like, if only he could convey the fact that all he wanted was companionship. But eventually in the same scene, he was like, money, like, do you want the money? And he's like, oh, money later. And it's like, it was I really liked that kind of shift where it was all of a sudden he was like helping Chris because he wanted to help him rather than because he wanted him to sign the check. So that was also, it's like, again, I liked the way when the characters like clicked and something changed them. And I think that was the entire purpose of the book, which is why it's so enjoyable. But yes, sorry, Becca, your go.
No, yeah. I agree with pretty much everything that has been said. The jumping around, even though this book did a remarkable job of juggling 16 characters, as we've said, it still got a little bit, hectic. And what I found, going back to your point, Johnny, about it being a good screenplay, it felt a lot like stage directions, like how short and like pointed everything was and how it jumped around from character to character. I could see this working so well on stage. They did make a movie out of this in 1997 called Get a Clue, not the Lindsay Lohan one. And I watched a trailer for it, and it looks like maybe a dumbed down version of the story, but I would love to see it as a one-act play, like rotating stage and everything, because the format, the like physical comedy, the way that characters play off one another, I think it would be easier to see visually than have to read and deal with jumping around everywhere. Like
Yeah.
it's but it was an enjoyable read, but the continuous POV jumping is what like knocked it down a peg for me as well. And
Yeah.
when you mentioned the New Yorker, I read this article on the New Yorker about this book because I wanted some backstory on it a little bit. I knew a couple of things about it going in. What's interesting is it's kind of based on a couple of true type facts, like the founder of the Kohler like sink bathtub company. Like he didn't have like a game that he did, but he like created a town. You're in Westing, Wisconsin, which is a town that was created specifically for the Westing Corporation's employees, which was a thing that happened back in the old, tycoon days. And that the same thing happened with Kohler. He like founded like Kohler, Wisconsin, and like, but it was an interesting kind of analysis of its like simultaneous praise and critique of American capitalism. And like, as someone who's grown up with American capitalism, I see it like it doesn't hate itself, but it is like it's critical of capitalism in the same way that I think Clue the movie is, which like it where it's like pitting a bunch of people against each other and them all kind of. What I found interesting about the mechanics of the game was that everybody was pitted against each other, like trying to like hoard their clues and like keep everything a secret. But the way you were supposed to solve the puzzle was everybody putting their clues together.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody, like, I caught on pretty quick that it was America the Beautiful. For context, people who are watching, each of the pairs get a like envelope with words, like random words in it, and so they're all puzzling over what their words mean. They're all trying to hide their words from other people because like just in case like it reveals something to them. But what it actually was is the lyrics to America the Beautiful. Once they figure out that putting it all together gave them the answer. So that was interesting. There's a lot of like American references like in general.
I really enjoyed that. I'm gonna be honest, I super enjoyed that because again, like as a non-American, I do feel that I feel like there's gonna be a video somewhere in there about how publication houses regionalize their literature. And that's why I enjoy reading a lot American classic fiction, because well, nobody's gonna regionalize classic fiction. So this was kind of like I get to enjoy that kind of literature again, or like that kind of language, because it is slightly different than you would get in say British literature, etc. So 100%, I actually really like the American element to it.
Yeah, no, it was very fun. It almost felt like like a 4th of July read somehow. Like this is a very patriotic read, and I enjoyed it because it poked fun at itself, but there was no like hatred or animosity towards its home country, which as someone who lives in America knows there's a little too much of that sometimes going around. So it was nice to see something that had a sort of purity to it. Again, not like and it being written in the 70s, like it was the 70s, like things are a little different now, but like it was still accessible and like relevant. And I was surprised to find that, like, I also didn't know until this video that was written in the 70s. So
1978.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was surprisingly relevant and accessible for a modern reader, and I liked that about it.
Would you guys recommend it?
Yes, I think I'd recommend it to like my teenage self, who was reading a lot of like different like mystery books and older literature, and I thought it'd be a good story to like learn character dialogue and and how to. I mean, it's a very unique kind of story. There's not many books that will follow a model such as this book does, and so it provides a very good like example for literacy learning, I guess, and
Yeah.
structure, and how to keep a story flowing, have loads of characters, and yet it's tiny, whereas probably something that any writer or anyone that's like trying to make a book will struggle with. It's like, well, I've only got like 5 characters, but I've already written like 300 pages, and I feel like they're barely explored. Like this is an interesting. There's those lots of different ways to write a story, so I feel like
Yeah.
this is a very unique example. So I would recommend it. It's fun. It's quick to read. Won't take you long if you binge it. I do recommend binging it. Try and do it all at once
Yeah,
or in 2 sittings or something,
Yeah.
because it's hard to then jump off the train of thought, as I said. But it's good. I recommend it.
Yeah. Recommend it to fans of mystery, like
Mm.
people that like Agatha Christie, Sherlock Holmes, anything like that.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think, I mean, I'm the type of person to recommend books to everyone. I think it's I'm the type of person to not have a favorite genre, or like to box myself into reading only one genre. Like I would give a shot even stuff that I technically don't see the appeal of, just to see what it's like. So I would say if you like books, go read it, just because it's such an interesting take on the genre, and it's short enough and accessible enough for you to enjoy it. So 100%. A book that, is worth your time and worth your enjoyment, I think, personally. But yeah, I'm gonna wrap up the video here, because unless you guys have anything to add about the book, I will wrap up the video here, just because I do think there's supposed to be a guest soon coming, and I kind of need to
go tidy up or
yeah
Nothing
retreat into
further
or
to
retreat.
add, Your Honor.
I have one thing to point out. I wonder if anybody else caught it, and it's when Turtle plays the stock market, and there's a point where Westing stocks start going up. Did anybody catch the joke that it was because all of the heirs were buying up Westing paper products? Like, I thought that was so funny. Like, and I was surprised I caught it, because I'm not that clever. So I'm like, why is she playing the stock market? Like, why is Westing doing so well all of a sudden? It's because in the will there's a line. It was almost like a throwaway line that says buy Westing paper products, and people took that literally.
yeah
And we're like, oh my god, we gotta, like, that could be a clue, let's hoard them. And then the stocks go up and she makes a shit ton of money, and I thought it was so fun.
yeah, that was really good. That was really good.
So it's stuff like that. It's a little like clever things like that. I feel like when you read it the first time, you're reading it for the mystery. If you read it a second time, which a lot of people like reread this book, like you're reading it for those clever little nuances.
Yeah.
So it is enjoyable in that way.
I do think I might reread it, actually, because I think now that I know that who Westing is, or who all of that, I kind of want to sit down and follow the clues and knowing the information instead of being completely not in the know. So I would say the readability factor of this book is quite high, because some books, you just read it and you're like, this is no way, no how you're getting me to reread this selection series. But look, I have opinions on that, which I still need to record. But yeah, I 100% agree. I am going to interject and say, so since we have, as you can probably tell, we don't have our fourth communicator in this call, and that is because various shufflings around are happening in everyone's life. So for the month of April, in which we are now, we're gonna have 2 maybe smaller videos, depending. One of it that is going to be me and Johnny are reading the second book of the Darker Shade of Magic trilogy. So that is going to be a video for this month, and my brother and I, Alex, we're going to be doing what we mentioned in the previous video, which is read Shadow and Bone, and then get together with Becca and Johnny and talk about it once we've all seen a couple of episodes of the show, and see what we think about without any background and with background. So I have that video, and that is probably going to be coming out in May, as it were. So that's kind of what the schedule is going to look a bit hectic before we're all back together for our May books. But yeah, if you want to check those out, the videos will You can subscribe to this channel. The videos will be out here as per usual. Again, if you'd like to check out Becca's stuff, it is great, and I'm 100% biased and 100% here for it, but she is great. Like, again, she's snappy, she's witty, her videos are just a joy to watch, so, you know, I'm here for it, and you should be here for it as well. But yeah, you can find all the links to everything I've mentioned down in the description below, or I will card them or tag them, etc. This was us. This was the Westing game. Hopefully you will give the book a chance. If you do, you know, leave us a comment. If you've read it, leave us a comment. If you would like to read it, leave us a comment, and we'll get back to you about if we agree, if we disagree. So yeah, this was us. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you in the next videos before resuming our normal schedule, which with a book that might or might not be interesting. We still have yet to decide. So, you know, I'm here bumping up the mystery to something we don't know yet. But yeah, thank you very much. Have a nice day. Stay safe. I will catch you guys later in the next one. Bye-bye.